what continuously drove my desire and appetite to progress throughout my career was actually, I want to get upstream. I want to identify the challenge, solve the issues before they get downstream. And for me, it's very much about creating the conditions within organizations and looking at this through a different lens, not just a policy procedural lens. These aren't siloed initiatives. No. These are actually part of the organization operating system. Very much all those drivers of stress, psychosocial risk in an organization, they are exactly the same drivers of performance. Companies will often launch values, but people will judge culture by what gets rewarded, what gets tolerated, and what gets repeated. I would say my gender transition changed my perspective profoundly. It taught me that belonging is not theoretical. You feel very quickly whether an organization or an environment is safe, and that's made me even more committed to helping leaders understand the human impact on the environments that they create.
Every leader has a story to tell, and the Safe Leader podcast uncovers the diversity story behind leading figures championing change to make our world a better place. Join me, your host, Mark McBride-Wright, as we hear from business leaders, academics, entrepreneurs, and agents of change as they share their journeys of innovation, resilience, and transformation. Together, we explore how they embrace the principles of safe leadership, sharing, acting, feeling, and empowering to create safer, more inclusive environments for everyone. Hello, welcome to the next episode of the Safe Leader podcast. I'm your host, Mark McBride-Wright, and today we're joined by Rachael Haynes, who is a workplace wellbeing strategist and culture change leader who has spent more than 25 years helping organisations create healthier, more effective and more human places to work. Her career has spanned consultancy, occupational health, employee benefits and organisational well-being, working with employers across the UK and internationally to address the deeper systems and cultures that shape how work gets done. Most recently, Rachael served as Director of Wellbeing Strategy and People Experience at the British Safety Council, having previously held leadership roles with Gallagher and Mates in Mind. Throughout her career, she has helped organisations move beyond well-being policies and isolated initiatives to embed trust, psychological safety and performance into everyday leadership and decision-making. Today, Rachael is entering a new chapter focused on organisational health, psychosocial risk and workplace culture. She is passionate about helping leaders see the invisible patterns that affect well-being and performance, and believes that workplaces can become more imaginative, courageous, and human when organisations are willing to question old assumptions and embrace complexity. Rachael, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Mark. It's an absolute pleasure to be here.
And we forgot to add in there, actually, the name of your new enterprise. You have a new business, don't you?
Yes, it's called Big Picture Lab, and it launches on the 5th of July.
Ah, okay, so it's not actually out there in the wild yet. Fantastic. The 5th of July, that is the same date that I incorporated Equal Engineers.
Oh, how fun.
Yeah, it becomes a date that... It's a date that gets forever etched in your mind when you have to do company's house supplier onboarding forms and you learn your company number off by heart. Right, so we'll come on to that in a minute, but let's go back. Let's find out about the younger Rachael. Tell us about your journey to workplace well-being. Is it something that you thought you would be doing in your career? Was it intentional?
Actually, no, it wasn't. I think I fell into that camp of probably half, depending on what statistics you look at, half of all people that leave school with not really having a clear idea of what they wanted to do. And now I sort of fell into the career. My first role was in health related insurance, and I found I really liked it. And then
Okay.
as I grew in that field, I then grew throughout various different parts of it, ultimately culminating in where I am today. But I think the thing which draws me to workplace health and well-being is that dynamic and that relationship between people and performance.
And how were there any experiences then across your career that shaped you into the leader that you've become? Well, I'm sure there are. That's how you become the leader you become. So what are some key moments in your journey to now that really, took you on that path and sharpened your focus to do what you're doing now?
It's most likely the combination of things like when you work in occupational health, insurance, and employee benefits, you get to see that a lot of that organizational energy that's
Yeah.
going into that almost that downstream response. So we were doing fantastic work, but a lot of it was supporting once things had gone wrong.
Okay.
What continuously drove my desire and appetite to progress in throughout my career was actually I want to get upstream. I want to
Right. Right.
identify the challenge, solve the issues before they get downstream.
Right. So you're very much in that reactive, problems have happened, people have suffered, people need support, and then you're working in the architecture that does that and accommodates that. So you were intentional around your, I want to help solve the root cause of these problems, and therefore mobilized yourself to a role that could do that. So did you find yourself, because obviously the British Safety Council, they set standards, that companies then use and align against. So tell us a bit about your journey and your work in that vein.
Yeah, so I mean, again, it's if we think about the why I'm here, it's come from looking at things from starting out almost at that reactive level. You're noticing everything that you're working through. You're seeing pretty much the same kinds of patterns, whether
Yep.
it's issues with pressure, management behaviors, role ambiguities, cultures of silence, and those disconnects in organizations, whatever that might be. That then drove me to progress beyond. And I think for me, the pivotal moment in my career when I really moved beyond the reactive side from the insurance OH side was when I moved into consultancy. So I had a wonderful 8 years at Willis Towers Watson, where a lot of the focus was on how do we start to identify the starting point rather than coming in after the fact. And that's what really then helped shape my career and
Okay.
drive my passion in that field. And for me, it's very much about creating the conditions within organizations and looking at this through a different lens, not just a policy procedural lens, but looking at
Yeah.
it through the lens of, if you like, well-being, psychosocial risk, etc. These aren't siloed initiatives.
No.
These are actually part of the organization operating system.
So where is it best placed then to sit OH as a function in an organogram? In the safety team, in the HR team, when it comes to functional reporting and yeah, skill sets.
It is a very logical fit for it to link and align with HR. It's also very logical for it to align with health and safety. I think the key opportunity is to make sure that health and safety and HR themselves are
Hmm.
aligned. So both focus on slightly different but overlapping areas and both crucial to every organization. But the challenge can sometimes be particularly when you look at stress management, psychosocial risk management in an
Yeah.
organization, often that's where you see a blurring of lines. And one of the interesting things that we see with a lot of our clients is that disconnect, not through any ill will or fault. It's just not
Yeah.
necessarily recognizing or having the foresight necessary to bring the two together. because you need policies and procedures, but importantly, you need activation when you're looking at psychosocial risk. So same with occupational health. I think it's OH also plays a crucial role, a pivotal role. It's also to what extent is OH actually involved in the insight to drive the strategy within the organization as well? Or is occupational health just there to do the work that it does and then step away? Obviously, the former is where you have much greater engagement, much greater and effective occupational health.
And hence then a good outcome would be reducing the number of cases that come to the standard practice of OH, where it's more the reactive and less proactive. And so well then, so you've mentioned in your, so when I read your bio there, you've done some work at Mates in Mind. So I know Jocelyn Shaw, who helped. Yeah, I met her, we ran a conference at Eco Engineers in 2018, and I think Mates in Mind was just being established back then. And it was when we had done our first masculinity in engineering research that's now become a longitudinal study that we do every 3 years. And so obviously Mates in Mind is anchored in the construction sector that has unfortunately a high rate of suicidal ideation and self-harm, majority male sector as well. How in your consultancy time and your time at the British Safety Council, it would be interesting to get your perspective on construction specifically as a sector, and do you think things have improved? They are improving generically?
I think there's been significant improvement in construction and awareness of mental health. I think where we are now, what I see a lot of in construction and related sectors is we're almost at that point where we've done the awareness raising.
Yes.
Now the so what? Now what do we then do with that? And there's always a risk. Same with any initiative you do related to this type of work. If the work and the initiative that you do is not based on an informed understanding, then how effective can it truly be? And with mental health awareness, and it's great to see the new guidance as well recently out as well, because again, it's all underpinning. Optimal mental health strategy is about understanding and addressing the organizational context.
Yeah.
And I do spend a lot of time talking with construction workers as well as obviously with leadership, with management team, etc. What I find fascinating is a lot of the talk is about what next. What we want to know what. So I know about mental health. I know that there are certain behaviours I should and shouldn't do, and I know I should think differently, etc. But it's, well, what do I now do?
Yeah.
What should my roles and responsibilities look like? How should I respond in XYZ situations and so forth? So I think we've done fantastic work across the sectors where we're now seeing the greater shift is not just looking at mental health awareness, but we're looking at organisational culture and psychosocial risk, and that's helping shape. And there's a really interesting dynamic. I think one of the biggest things I see in the mental health psychosocial risk piece is the positioning.
Okay.
And it's how it has historically evolved, because we weren't really talking about stress and psychosocial risk, certainly not really much 20 years ago. 10 years ago to some extent. Today it's obviously very common, and we've got some outstanding guidance, the HSC guidance, for example, and the 45,003 and so forth. So there's great guidance out there. Key, of course, in making sure that's going to work in an organisation is translating the guidance to the practical day-to-day. But I would say the most common stumbling block to getting it right is packaging. It's how you how do you package psychosocial risk to leadership teams? Leaders will engage with what they are seeing and what they're presented with. A lot of psychosocial risk management tends to fall into the policy, procedural initiatives, and I would, obviously don't quote me on this statistic, I would say in about 3/4 of the companies that I go into, they are still working very much with lagging indicators.
Yeah.
We only know we've got a stress issue because we're seeing it and we're observing things happening. We're seeing it in things like, could be anything from fatigue to higher turnover to absence data to reduction in engagement score metrics, whatever that might be. We're seeing it in those metrics, but what we're not necessarily doing is translating, looking at all of that holistically, or if we were AI, heuristically, looking at all of that holistically and translating that into how does this actually impact our bottom line performance? How is it impacting things like productivity, performance, collaboration, creativity, innovation, sales numbers? Once we understand that picture, that's when leadership get very engaged.
And what work then is ongoing to try and establish that? Are there some infrastructure projects or some construction sites, some organizations that are trying to draw some correlations or causation analysis there?
I can't comment on other I can't speak, Mark. I can't comment on other organizations. I'll start that again. It is hot, isn't it? I can't comment on what other organizations are doing outside of the ones that, of course, that I've worked with. Where what we have found is once we've helped start that journey with them, they're now starting to look much more proactively. Now that they are better informed and better equipped with the more holistic picture, it's enabled them to make it a more business priority, and therefore it becomes it becomes a board issue as opposed to a sideboard issue of, well, what's our latest absence statistics and what's driving that. So rather than just looking at the reactive end output numbers, we're looking at the proactive up front. So once we understand, we're able to do more with it. In fact, when we look at what leaders are telling us turns their lights on when it comes to the very, very technical term of psychosocial risk or stress management, the things which get their attention are not things like policy, procedure, initiatives. What gets their attention is bottom line performance, impact on engagement, and clearer plans on what we need to do differently as leaders.
Yes.
And what things we need to shift, what dials do we need to switch? Because very much all those drivers of stress, psychosocial risk in an organization, they are exactly the same drivers of performance.
Yeah.
So things like work demands, job control, autonomy, relationships, if we get them right, they drive innovation, creativity. If we get them wrong, they don't. So we very much like to look at things for that. What are your inhibitors? What are your enablers? Keeping it very simple but practical, relevant to the organization. Once HR, health and safety can understand that, package that for leaders, then the work is almost half done. Because, of course, you and I both know, as I'm sure all of your audience knows as well, if we haven't got leadership engaged in this, it's always going to become very hard work for the person driving that initiative in your organization. And of course, it's not going to be effective. You're always going to be back-footed.
And what I would layer into that is what I built the whole Safe Leader framework around is leaders giving some color and contrast to the actions that are happening by sharing their personal connection to it, sharing what some of the root causes are that might be driving a high absence rate or a high stress rate, just lowering the guard and being a human-centered leadership, essentially. I often find leaders forget about the shadow that they cast across an organization, and for fear of saying the wrong thing or not looking like or causing offense or being negative, they hold back, or they don't because that's how you destigmatize mental ill health or stress, experiencing stress in your life, right? Where people connect on a human to human level, irrespective of the hierarchy. So if you've got a leadership doing a site tour and they're out on site and they're talking to a construction worker, being able to connect on a shared experience, whether it be positive or negative or a challenge or an opportunity, sort of builds that rapport. It forges those connections around the organization. So I'd be really interested to see that play out more in any high risk industry, whether it be rail or energy or nuclear, like a sort of nicer blending between leadership, frontline workers, but also the middle management.
Yeah, and it's a lovely point, Mark. And I think this is a really nice way to illustrate the key fundamental overlap as opposed to distinct separation of things like culture change, psychosocial risk management, well-being, etc., because they are all closely interlinked and vitally. I mean, just thinking off the top of my head, a thought which came to mind as you were saying that, Mark, was, when we think about, when things get uncertain in an organisation, what's the first thing tends to happen is leaders will tend to generally reach for tighter processes. They might reach for more reporting, might feel like more micromanagement, more sign off, or more communication cascades, so things can become challenging. So there can be an over-reliance on control, but I have yet to come across a genuinely bad leader or a bad manager that genuinely wants to do the wrong thing.
Yeah.
I will come across leaders that generally always want to do the right thing, but they haven't had the opportunity to necessarily step back and reflect and recognize, be self-aware of, what do I need to change? And getting that mindset of just recognizing actually if there's pain in the organization, it's only ever driven and sourced from one particular place, and that starts up here. And once we help understand that, and once we are empowered as leaders to know that, that helps us and empowers us to make the effective change.
It's I always remember someone, or maybe I heard it on a podcast, I can't remember. It's just sort of being that neutral, curiosity, really good attribute to have in a moment where you might be wanting to viscerally respond to something that's happened in your organization, but how you respond in that moment can affect the psychological safety of whether anything subsequently will be reported in the future. But actually, if you just try and stay neutral, find out what happened, do a review. It's like the language around just culture, using the language around, I saw an example of one organization that really did overhaul the language in all their policies and procedures. They didn't use the word investigation. They used the word learning review. They didn't have safety auditors. They had safety consultants or safety advisors, safety coaches. That was the word they used. Safety coaches within their team. And it just brought a different energy, like a different, it reframed, I guess, the relationship between health and safety as a core support function, enabling an organization where hopefully, as you say, no one sets out to cause harm, and actually it was maybe a failure in the process or the system that led to the event occurring.
Yeah, I love what you say there, Mark. And it is the behaviours. Processes are absolutely essential. We need the guidance to work within. It's then, how does that then apply within our culture? Take the example of psychosocial risk management. One of the reasons why I think we still see a lot of organisations working on lagging indicators, or once things have gone wrong, is because we're still not looking at the broader picture. We're still not positioning it in such a way, and also we're still packaging it and positioning it as, right, okay, there's a stress related factor, therefore we follow this particular part of the policy, we do a risk assessment. But as with health and safety, physical health and safety, you don't do physical risk assessments after the fact, which is interesting with stress risk assessments, the amount of stress risk assessments
that's true. Yeah.
afterwards. But it's helping us understand that picture, because that's important, because that helps shape the behaviours. So to your point, the things that leaders, managers do, think, say, act, behave has not necessarily both a spoken and an unspoken impact on their teams beneath them. And culture, this is one of the reasons why a shift in culture does not happen the following day. It takes time, because the leadership have to understand, and own that solution, and then
build trust,
and maintain consistency. And at the moment they break that consistency, at the moment they revert to a former type, that will have significantly detrimental impact on the workforce, because your workforce by this point, they might have seen 3 months of a very different perspective from leadership behaviours, and they now might start to be more open, more confident, more comfortable, whatever that might be. And then if there's suddenly a revert to type, then almost all that goodwill can just fall down.
Shuts down. It's oh, I forgot what I was going to say there. It's a really, that's what I wanted to ask you. You mentioned there stress assessments being done after. So is that something an organisation ought to be doing? Like you would do a physical safety risk assessment ahead of doing a planned piece of work or something. Should departments be doing stress risk assessments proactively?
Absolutely, yeah. But I would, from my side, I wouldn't say just do that. I would say look at wider data as well, get and then synthesize the picture together. So team-based and organization-wide stress risk assessments. So if you look at, say, the HSE Management Standards Indicator tool, it's a really great tool. It's going to give you one side of the story. It's going to give you the exposures to the pressures. What it won't necessarily give you is the so what. So combine, say, that tool, those outputs, if that's a model that an organization uses, fantastic. But combine that with things like engagement metrics. That gives you more of the so what, but then synthesize too. Because what's really key is understanding, well, okay, it might be, I'll give you a really crude example. So imagine I work in a factory. I've got to make 50 widgets a day, Mark, and that's all I have to do. I'm nearing retirement. I'm quite comfortable. I've had a great career. I'm comfortable. I'm happy. I love doing this job. Actually, it's little responsibility. I've got to make 50 widgets. Love it. I make 50 widgets a day, and suddenly I get to complete a stress risk assessment, or the HSE Management Standards Indicator tool. It's going to ask how exposed to control I am, or what my job control looks like. I'm going to pretty much answer probably to what might appear a negative, but actually it's a positive to me. And we might not get that nuance if we're only looking at one measure. So the importance of, obviously it's a super simple example, but it's important to look at multiple measures in order to, and then bring them together, tell your story, engages the leadership, then it becomes a board business level decision, tabled item, because then we know, great, now we know much more clearly what's driving, let's say, dips in performance here, and why we might have a slightly higher turnover of staff over there, for example, and that helps us be much more clearer rather than looking siloed. But absolutely, to your question, I certainly definitely recommend team-based assessments are fantastic. I think group-wide assessments critical, and as to how you do it. Again, it's also looking at through the lens of actually what's going to be relevant for us here. Also, how are we going to communicate it? So if, let's say tomorrow we suddenly introduce doing a group-wide stress indicator assessment tool. We need to think carefully about, well, how are we going to communicate this?
Yeah, that was my next question, actually, about that specific tool. So you mentioned the HSE have a management standard indicator tool, but the stress indicator tool is a different tool, isn't it? it's there, and there's two versions. There's the one for hybrid home working that's an add-on, and then
That's right, yes. And
yeah,
then, of course, you've also got the things like the line manager competency indicator tool. So there's some wonderful
yeah.
tools that
Wow,
agencies
there's a lot then.
provide. And and I believe they're still freely available and accessible. So they're really, really beneficial. But it's before we get into those, almost, it's worth taking a step back within our
Yeah,
organisation to understand what do we need to do, what do we know already,
yeah,
what do we need to do, what buttons do we need to change, and then which tools are going to be most effective and optimal for us.
yeah. What's your view on companies using like the ones from the regular agency, the like the regulator that have an origin and can be validated independently because they've been done many times, and versus going to a consultancy that has its own metrics and measurement? Is there a preference for one over the other?
It does come back to where you are as an organisation and what's going to be right for you. What I do find with many organisations is they are still low to middling on maturity and understanding. So
Yeah,
consultancy firms can be really beneficial in helping them navigate what is going to be effective and right. You've also got fantastic variety of and wide host of engagement metrics out there as well. Some
yeah,
do include specific questions which will be very almost comparable over to things like the agency management standards indicator tool.
yeah,
Some will obviously, well, actually most engagement tools will provide a really good broad understanding of exposures to stress, but they won't necessarily be specific. I,
yes,
I had a really interesting observation about a year ago with a client that they came and said, "Could you help us with X?" I won't go into detail, and we said, "Yes, of course, absolutely." Well, in order for us to create X, let's have a quick look. Let's explore what's going on, so we can make sure that X is optimal for your organisation. It's going to
right,
land on the ground. And one of the things that we looked at was their engagement data. So they had engagement data, they had absence data, they had turnover data, but otherwise they were generally limited on their data. But the engagement metrics were quite good, and they had a very high response rate. It gave a really good statistically viable sample base, really
right,
valid, really worth looking at. What was interesting was before they shared it with us, they said to me, but Rachel, there's no questions in the survey that's specific to stress. Now, obviously, I knew which measure they'd use, or which engagement tool they'd use, so I knew all of the metrics that will be in there. So
yeah,
I had to explain it will actually probably give us as much, if not more, as we would do. All
right.
you did was just the specific, because you need to be thinking about those broader factors rather than the specifics. Because,
Yeah.
of course, and again, it's how you use it, how you communicate it is absolutely
Well,
critical.
that exactly, and then so when you do a survey, it'll give you a snapshot, and like doing like the safety climate assessment tool. That's a snapshot, and it's maybe a leading indicator for broader culture. But then how you communicate it then is sort of, well, what's the maturity matrix that is the standard for your sector? You've got the Parker Hudson model that sort of its provenance is in oil and gas, and it's in energy. Now, what's your experience then with doing that mapping or doing that transition from, right, we've done some snapshots, and then, as you say, it's how you communicate it. Well, how do you communicate it?
And it's not just about the post communication, which of course is all about making sure that people are aware of the outputs and there's clarity, and you then have follow up to those outputs. So focus groups, workshops, whatever that might look
Yeah,
like. But it's helping build the broader picture that underpins as you say, the initial snapshot that we've captured. But of
yeah,
course, the pre-communication of it, it's actually what are the conditions we're working in right now?
mhm,
How much might those conditions influence who, what, and how people respond? And that's
right,
really important. And it's helping us understand that in all the work that obviously within Big Picture Lab, we do surveys, and we
yep,
tend to do generic, bespoke surveys. We always use evidence-based measurable, cross-referenceable measures, but we tend to tap into what do we actually need to understand.
Right.
But we only tend to use surveys where either never a survey has ever been done, which is very rare. Many organizations will have some kind of survey, whether it's just a basic annual pulse survey or other. But most organizations will already have survey data, and we're not there to do survey fatigue, but we're there to essentially pull everything within their understanding, their purview they've already got before then going in. So we tend to do what we find is most effective from our side is actually going in and understanding where they are. It's a bit like a jigsaw. We get our jigsaw out and we see which pieces are missing. Okay, we've got gaps in understanding over here. What are the best ways for us to build those? How important and how relevant is it for us to build that? And how much of a key and informed picture do we have in the, let's say, the 75 pieces of our 100-piece jigsaw? Do we have enough that's going to give us it's going to inform us and the organisation to take a more informed approach? Or are there gaps that perhaps actually we probably do want to probe a few more areas? And it's when we get into that probing that's where we tend to bring in additional surveys where they're going to be relevant.
I see.
Because there's an awful lot of great survey tools out there. It's also about how we're interpreting that data and what else are we interpreting that data with.
If I flip it round a bit then, so say you're a prospective candidate, you want to go and work in an organisation, but you want to do your covert desktop assessment first to find out if you're going to feel a sense of belonging when you get into that organisation. Or let's just say you want to do a benchmark of companies in, I don't know, choose a sector, retail. You want to benchmark the top 20 brands that you know in retail. What are some of the metrics that are available in publicly available information that one could look to that are then also usually illustrative accurately to the internal, because all the stuff we've been talking about you wouldn't see from the outside looking in unless you're working like with the client, right, as the consultant, or you're employed already, or you're a member of the leadership team. But if you're wanting to just sort of do a desktop review and find out, what would be your advice?
So I would look at specific sector-based evidence bases that are out there, and some sectors have some great data. Construction's quite good. Retail does have a lot of data out there. Legal profession has some, financial services. There's a lot of data out there which looks at culture, psychosocial risk, exposure, etc. across sectors. So that's a great starting place. But if I was in that very fortunate position to be being recruited into, let's say, a role within an organisation, and I had that incredibly fortunate opportunity to say, Rachel, why don't you come in, before you decide whether you want to join us, come and spend a day with us and have a look under the hood. If I could do that, obviously that doesn't generally happen, but if that ever happened, there'll be a multitude of data to be looking at, whether it's the absence data, the engagements data, any stress-related data, turnover data, etc., and then it's looking at all of that holistically.
Yeah.
Because each part of that proverbial jigsaw will give you another nuanced picture.
Right.
And I mean, it's the super obvious one if we only looked at EAP data outputs. Now, we know EAP usage will be generally sort of between 2 to 4% of a workforce in any given year will use it. Doesn't necessarily mean that actually that's the amount of people that would benefit from it day in, day out. Now, we know 30 to 50%, depending on where we are, which organisation, etc., will have employees that will be struggling in some shape or form. Yeah. And then there'll be, of course, self-awareness to know whether they should reach out or could. Yeah. There's human nature of, well, actually, what are the personal psychological barriers that an individual might put up before they use it. So to say that EAP has low utilization is a complete misnomer. Right. But if you just looked at EAP utilization at, say, the 2 to 4%, it's only going to give you a partial picture, a very small partial picture of what
hence the jigsaw need. I like that. I like that. What's your view on exit data? So when you've got people that they've handed in their notice and they're leaving, do you find exit interviews happen? I mean, the horse is kind of bolted at that point, right? But at least there's an opportunity to capture learning, maybe for an organisation to do better. Do you find they get done? And if they do get done, is the data meaningful, or do they not get done?
I would say they are very commonly done. For certainly most of the organisations that I've worked with over the last 10 years, there's been some form of exit metric there. Exit data is interesting because it's like with all data, Mark. It's not what actually on paper that we see. It's what's also not written there as well. What's it telling us and what's it not telling us? So with exit interview data, that's a really interesting one because exit interview data will be driven by a number of factors. Obviously the obvious one being, do we do it? Do we do it consistently? How do we do it?
Yeah.
What are the cultural conditions anyway to begin with? Let's say, for argument's sake, if it's an organisation where we've also identified that voice is one of the challenge points within an organisation, i.e. people don't feel that they can speak up, or people don't feel that things will be done if they voice opinions, and therefore people don't necessarily speak up. Obviously, that's going to have a significant impact on the validity and the relevance of the exit interview data. So it's looking, and that's another really great example, isn't it? Because it might be that, well, let's go and why are people leaving? Let's only go and look at our exit interview data. But if we haven't factored all those previous things, our other data and metrics, it's still only going to give us a partial picture. So it's not just a case of how many pieces of the puzzle do we get. In this case, we've got 75 of our 100. It's also how robust is that data? Because I might look at it and say, actually, your EAP data is really, really valid. Normally, I would say EAP data is probably only going to give us 2 or 3% of the total picture. But there might be situations, and we have come across situations where they have a high engaged utilization because they've got a culture which actually supports. You've got, say, line management referral into the service, and there's great trust in management, for example, yada yada, etc., etc. So actually, their utilization is actually quite representative, and it's quite similar to what we see in their other data sets. So then therefore it becomes very relevant. So it's understanding that, which also helps us understand the credibility of each part of the data as well.
So I guess it does come down to it's enabled if the health and safety team have a really good, open, enabling relationship with the HR team and any other places that may be involved in organisational design and development, talent, maybe the talent team. Sometimes learning and development separate to HR, isn't it? So so all the bits where people are involved.
Yeah, and I think that the dynamic between HR and health and safety is absolutely crucial. I would say there were at least 5 clients in the last couple of years where the very first thing we did was help those two parties align. Right. And I would say all of the successful projects that where we've gone in and there's great traction already, it's where you've got terrific alignment between those two parties in the business. And ultimately, the next group almost to bring in is, right, let's now empower the leadership.
Right, got you.
That's one which I would say is the one that's largely missing. And I think if we think specifically around psychosocial risk management, the fundamental number one blocker, I would say, blocker's the right word, it's a bit harsh, isn't it? I would say the big blocker to organizations getting stress management effectively without it becoming lagging indicators or something else to do, or well, we've got to do it because we've got legal responsibility, etc. The moment it becomes actually this is fun, this is relevant, this is business critical, is the moment we understand that picture. It's the moment leaders are empowered to say, right, fantastic. I understand, Mark, why performance in sales is dropping. I have a really clear picture now of why we're seeing reductions in communication over these particular areas. That's going to really help us know where we need to focus our attention. So the role of HR and health and safety is crucial. And I think can sometimes be confused or put into a box of they're there to do it. That's their role.
Yeah.
Actually, no, they're there to empower the leadership team to own and drive.
Yeah, good
as
point.
Opposed to, can you make sure you've got the right policies in place? And has our medical insurance renewed this year? I'm being facetious, of course.
Yeah. No, I love that. I love that you used the word fun as well, because you don't often associate work with fun, and we need to do that more, because people, when they feel joy and purpose alignment in what they do and what they care for, the culture will just sort of correct itself in some way, shape or fashion. Okay, quick fire questions. You ready?
Go.
Right. What's one well-being myth you'd love to bust?
That well-being is not a product, or well-being. Oh, of course, the myth. I was about to do it in the reverse order. Well-being is a product.
What's the most underrated ingredient of a healthy workplace?
Trust.
What's a book that changed how you think about leadership or well-being?
It's got to be Simon Sinek's Start With Why.
One phrase you wish leaders would stop using?
My door is always open.
Why?
Because, yes, it should be a given. It's whether that's not the reason people aren't coming into your office. It's understanding why people aren't coming into your office is because most likely linked to behaviours and actions and past behaviours. And there'll also be an element of that individual employee's own frame of reference as well.
Brilliant. What's the most common mistake organisations make when trying to improve culture?
I would say trying to change the language without changing the experience.
Oh, nice.
So what I mean by that is, companies will often launch values or campaigns or behaviours, for example, but people will judge culture by what gets rewarded, what gets tolerated, and what gets repeated.
Yeah. What's your ideal way to switch off and recharge?
I would say bike ride, although not in this heat at the moment, I'll be honest. Bike ride or a movie.
What's a challenge that changed your perspective on leadership?
Oh, gosh. I would say my gender transition changed my perspective profoundly. It taught me that belonging is not theoretical. You feel very quickly whether an organisation or an environment is safe, whether people are curious, whether people are kind, whether you can be fully present. And that's made me even more committed to helping leaders understand the human impact on the environments that they create.
And finally, what's one word that sums up what organisational health means to you?
Conditions.
Conditions. Brilliant. Thank you, Rachel. Really enjoyed your perspective there. If people want to find out more about your work or to get in touch, how should they do that?
They can find me on LinkedIn, or they can go to our website, which is bigpicturelab.co.uk.
Brilliant. Well, we'll put links in the show notes as well. Thank you so much. Maybe we'll get a chance to collaborate at some point in the future.
I do hope so.
Great.
Lovely to meet you, Mark.
Thank you. You have been listening to the Safe Leader podcast, uncovering the diversity story behind leading figures championing change to make our world a better place. If you have enjoyed the episode, please subscribe to the Safe Leader podcast on your podcast platform of choice and get notified when a new episode goes live. Did you know that we also offer a full transcript on each of our podcast episodes? Check out my website, McBride-Wright.com. Here, you can also explore the training, coaching, and keynote speaking services I offer. And whilst you're there, why not join the Safe Leader community by subscribing to the Safe Leader Insights mailing list? Thank you for listening, and please come back and join us on a future episode.